the CME and the CBOT break down, not able to deliver, buyers will go direct to the silos or grain depositories themselves, but there will be no price discovery, and they will source themselves directly from the growers, as there will be no markets. That's what's coming in September. You knew it wasn't going to stop with CO2. You knew that. There was going to be another control mechanism. Then it was nitrous oxide they tried for a while, and then it was ozone, and now it's gone past CO2. Now it's another boogeyman of nitrogen. Like what? How many more? What are they going to do? Just oxygen next is going to be the bad thing? Like, oh, you got
Yeah, it is. It is. And you know what kills me is if you remember the what was that movie that Al Gore put out here how many years ago, that
Inconvenient Truth.
Inconvenient Truth, that fear-mongering garbage. Wasn't half the East Coast supposed to be underwater by now? Isn't that what he predicted back then? Mass death, shoreline's going to be reduced by who knows how many hundreds of miles because it's going to be covered by water. These people just these same group, these same ilk that have been wrong over and over and over again, still continue to somehow fool the masses, David. That's what I just can't get my mind around. There's like such a disconnect between these fools that are making these proclamations and these claims that they've been wrong so many times. How are we going to break through that, David? How are we going to get to the point where when's going to come to the point where people are just going to smack their head and go, now I get it. It's all been a fraud. It's all been a fraud. Are we close? Please tell me, David, that we're close, because it's like it's killing me watching these people continue to dupe
lost
everybody.
Faith in humanity. They're never going to. The people who are sort of awake or semi-awake or trying to get awake right now, that's the only percentage of people that will ever wake up. The other 50% or maybe even 60 will never get it. Even when they're starving to death on the street and needing government's assistance, they'll never get it. They really won't. They'll still believe the narrative of why they need the food on the street because it was somebody else's doing that caused this, that caused that, and now aren't you so happy the government's solving your problem? I'm telling you, the brainwashing and the indoctrination through the systems of birth through schooling, et cetera, and society, and keeping your neighbors, friends, and family and coworkers around you to keep you in that box is all encompassing. Truly is.
Yeah, it's true.
Now,
they don't even really need to be everywhere. All they have to do is have
no,
a couple
they don't need
of
to be everywhere. Everybody else is everywhere for
Exactly.
you, just like it was in China. It worked in China until now everybody's got nothing, and they realize they got no money, no place to stay, and they just don't care anymore because there's nothing else to lose because their mandate was removed. So the emperor's going to have to, he's the new emperor, so he's going to have to deal with the repercussions and the fallout.
Well, David, we got to go.
They literally stopped paying for all mortgages in the country. All these banks are going to have tremendous, tremendous problems moving forward.
Oh, yeah. Well, as they should.
Yeah, thank you. And James, I sent you a quick graphic about composition in the atmosphere of gases. Nitrogen is 78% of our atmosphere. 78, but they still want to demonize it and take the farmers down in the Netherlands because of nitrogen, which is 78% of all of Earth's atmosphere. And carbon dioxide, 3/100ths of 1%. Pulling this in here, the way I can describe it would be a scarcity. Now we're talking about industrial side here on corporation to corporation, and you and me going to the supermarket, not including this, but on the industrial side or the manufacturing end of things, as it was quoted to me by a person I interviewed at the CME just yesterday, scarcity market on basic foodstuffs. There will be no price discovery as the CME and the CBOT breakdown, not able to deliver. Buyers will go direct to the silos or grain depositories themselves, but there will be no price discovery, and they will source themselves directly from the growers, as there will be no markets. That's what's coming in September.
That's not very good. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe not everywhere, but there are going to be pockets around the United States, around America, that's going to have no food on the shelves. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that would be accurate. And that would be globally as well, not just the U.S.
So
if you live closer to a food producing area, you're going to be all right. But if you're living in somewhere that's a food desert that you have to import your foods for hundreds of thousands of miles and you're relying on only store-bought foods and there's no local farmers growing around you, and if you're only relying on just like a weekend market for farmers co-ops, they're going to stop selling quickly. That's not going to be a viable source for you anymore to purchase anything at that point. It'll be all encompassing. It'll be a global event here. It's not going to be, you can't tell me that you take down the CME, the futures market doesn't function properly anymore for deliveries, and that doesn't affect the rest of the world stock markets, bonds, and everything else in between that, including, because the nickel thing, as it was explained, okay, nickel went from $3,000 to $125,000 over that 7-day trading period in London. They pulled back a lot of the trades. And the guy I was talking to is like, big whoop, man, it's nickel. Like, it's used for stainless steel. Who cares? He's talking basic foodstuffs this time. Huge difference. Nickel, who cares? Basic foodstuffs, the world stops on a dime.
So are okay, so I how do I couch this next question? I'm not saying that it's never too late. Okay, it's never obviously too late as long as you're breathing air and you have you're mobile and ambulatory. You can survive. I know it's late in the game, but would you recommend that communities start forming parallel economies right now? I mean, after this show is over, and when I say parallel economies, I mean, whether it's bartering, whether it's trade and services, labor, if you have items that you've already manufactured that you have stock of, whatever it would be, I believe there needs to be local communities start developing parallel economies because the overall financial system, I believe, is ripe for collapse. And when I say that, there's still going to always be economy. When I go into my local grocery store or the local farmer and I buy a bag of carrots from the Hutterites down the road here, and I give them $6 or $7 for a bag of carrots, that's not a financial system transaction. That's an economy. That's an economic. That's economy between two people. That I don't believe will collapse. The overall financial system will. Should we start getting the parallel economies in place right now, David?
Absolutely, you should. And I'll give you some other things that are on the list here. Food grade storage tanks, food grade plastic 55-gallon tanks, the totes anywhere from 250 gallons upward, because any storage and those plastics are going to get real expensive. And as the economy goes, these types of things will disappear. Now, here's another thing. The barges have disappeared across America. Now, if you ever drove across the Mississippi River, and if you go from Memphis and you head over to Arkansas, you see barges stacked up and down. And, usually if they're not being used, they'll just be off to the side there. They'll be waiting. They'll be, they won't have anything in them. But they're gone now. Like, they're not even there. So the amount of trade going back and forth doesn't explain why all the barges are gone. And they couldn't explain it either. These guys up there in Chicago are just wondering, where did all the barges go to? Because they're physically not there anymore. They're not dry docked or parked because diesel fuel got too expensive. They're literally gone. Like the same thing that happened with the shipping containers. Same thing happening with the railroad cars currently. Now, why was it that the railroads knocked everybody's rail capacity down 20%? Well, 20% of the rail cars just disappeared. Now, they can say it's because they didn't have the teams and the crews and the engineers. That's great. But where did the rail cars go? There can't be that many sitting in the dock waiting to be repaired.
Probably being shipped to China.
I'm not sure. I really not. Nobody has an answer as to where they've gone. So when you're talking about storage of things you might acquire moving forward, if you do get something in bulk, so imagine if your community could come together and get a ton of wheat or corn or grain. And I'm not talking dent corn like the stuff for high fructose corn syrup. I'm talking more on the edible things that can be ground into wheat flours, more say heirloom varieties, that sort of thing. If you could purchase up to a ton of that, well, where are you going to put a ton? A ton's a lot. So you're going to have to store it somewhere. So looking forward, knowing that the same plastics that are in these food grade storage tanks and food grade 55-gallon drums, that's going to go bye-bye also. And then the totes also would be used for water storage, so many times it rains. And we could talk all day long about what's in the skies, the metals in the skies coming down on top of us. But to be able to store water, even if you can get your water out of a spring and then put it in there and use gravity to push it somewhere else, you could possibly even spin a motor and make electricity, those of you who like Schauberger devices. So it requires a little dam, but you could substitute that with a tote as long as it was 500 gallons. So there's a lot of uses for these storage tanks for water and also for food. People aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about getting the food. Where are you going to store it? You're going to need storage. And then if you get a community together, you're going to need more storage. these things are going to disappear quickly as soon as this event starts to take
Here's
place.
another thing that's going to disappear, and I want to bring this up again because I've thought about this maybe every day since you said it last time, David, since you're on my show. And it makes perfect sense. Garden tools. If you can get a hold of garden tools, there was someone on one of the local things here selling garden tools, a whole bunch of garden tools here on one of these local boards, and I got to it too late. But they were selling a whole mess of garden tools for like $30. I'm thinking, man, would have been nice to go there and snatch those, because you're going to find a point where shovels and a hoe and a pick and things like that are just going to be, they're just not going to be there. There's no way when 40 million people decide that they're going to start farming and there's only 1 million items available for them to farm with. I mean, it's just a math problem, David, and it's a simple math problem. The answer is go out and start getting farming equipment. And what basic, if you had to get 4 or 5 or 6 basic pieces of farming tools, what would you? Of course, shovel, rake, maybe two kinds of rake. What would you get for garden tools? It's just 4 or 5, 6 different ones that people should really go out and get today.
Well, a mattock for sure, because then you can dig through roots and you can really chop some hard ground. So if we're talking about like hard tools, yeah, and you probably want to get a pitchfork as well, because a lot of times if you chop all those grasses and you want to move them or throw them on a fire or something, you're going to want to not get too close to the fire, because the more you get hurt or, anything happens in a grid down, anything that's a minor injury could turn into something major later. So the further you can keep yourself away from the danger. And, I found this really cool spade. It was shaped like a V. It was from the 1940s, and you pulled it in and it kind of plowed up the dirt on one side. So as you pulled through the row where you could put water in, it sort of formed that V formation. Otherwise, you have to go up and down each side and do it yourself. But this one, you just put it in the middle, raked it back, and it kind of split off the dirt. Something like that. And different kinds of shovels, too. I like this little tiny mini shovel. And then there's one that's got the really long blade, but it's very thin, and then just your regular standard size shovel. You're going to need rakes, also different kinds of rakes, different sizes, because not one size with a giant, big tooth rake. You might want something that's half the size. So you got to think about in your garden, you're going to be needing to get into tighter spaces also. Like those garden tools are great on a big open yard, but when you're trying to get in between rows, you're going to need to shrink your tool size. So gardening tools, you want to think small and large for, just more general things. You want to get loppers, for sure, different kinds of loppers, like 4, 5, 6, 10 pairs of those, plus pruners, loppers. You want to have a pair of pruners for like doing brush, but you want to have a pair of pruners for actually things that you want to eat that cut super clean on any of your fruit plants or trees when you're pruning. So, there's different types of pruners to get, and then that'd be my first go-to. And estate sales, if I might add something, James. Estate sales.
Nice.
Are one of the best places to find old tools, because you get that good stuff from the 1940s and 50s with a super hard iron. Like the tools we have now are junk compared to what's back then.
No, it's true. It's true.
And a new skill, and can I add one last thing?
Of course.
A skill you're going to need to know is how to produce and change out your own handles for all these tools that are going to continually break the handles.
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you even go to get something that actually sort of looks like a handle and then taper that down so it fits in, put the screw, bend it over, put the nail, bend it, or whatever you're going to do. Making a handle is going to be a handy trade to have also, making handles for tools.
We've had conversations with people that there's not many of them still around, but that were alive during the Great Depression, way back. And even things like nails, David, even things like a single nail or a single screw were practically impossible to come by. They were scarce. You couldn't find them hardly anywhere. I don't know if we're going to get back to that 30s type of Depression era type scenario. But that's why you see a lot of these old timers. You go in their garage and they have all these racks of these nails and screws and everything, all in mace in baby food jars, all tied.
I do too.
Right?
I'm a fan of buying that stuff.
Right, because
sales.
that even those type of things, I know it may seem like a small item that's inconsequential, but man, I'll tell you, if you get to a point where you got to board an area up to keep the mobs out, you're going to want to have a nail. A nail's going to be worth $1 million at some point. I mean, in a crisis scenario. You care to comment on even the smaller items, David, the stuff that may seem insignificant to folks? Like I've talked before, for example, feminine care products. That's just one example as far as there's going to be a shortage of those. If you don't have the money to buy a whole bunch of meat, let's say, or storable food, if you can afford to buy the packages of those, which are relatively inexpensive, they're going to be like gold in a grid down situation. Talk about that if you can, David. Maybe the stuff that maybe people don't have directly on their radar. Everybody thinks of food and water and guns and ammo and everything. What about the stuff that people don't think about too much? You care to comment on that?
Duct tape is one. I mean, even here when things are functional, sometimes I need it, and I just ran out of it, and I'm like, oh, it would be so easy to fix if I just had a piece of duct tape. I could wrap it around there for just a minute. And I had a discussion with somebody about what should we buy an LT? I think it was an LT 2500 Woodmeister sawmill, because we got a lot of pine trees around our area, and I got a ton on my property. I'm always cutting them down, or they're falling in the wind. So I was debating whether to buy the sawmill, portable sawmill, and he's like, why would you do that? If it really does go to grid down and 30, 40, 50% of the people die off around, you got all these empty houses. You just walk in and like disassemble the wood already pre-cut. I mean, you don't have to cut your own wood because there'll be so much excess stuff this time comparatively to what was in the 30s. But then you bring up a great point. Like for me, we build a lot of stuff out of shipping crates, and we make raised garden beds out of the shipping crates. We made some bookshelves and spice racks out of shipping crates. So how do you take a shipping crate apart, and how do you able to save the nails out of that? How can you bend nails back again? Like these are skills you need to have. Like you might bend your nail a little bit, but can you put it on a surface and then bang it straight enough where you could put it in again? You can reuse some stuff, which brings me back to if you're going to disassemble a house and try to get things out of there, there's going to be plenty of nails and plenty of lumber. But how careful and delicate are you removing that and deconstructing it so you can reuse that again? And yeah, you're right. These estate sales, you go in, I mean, there's copper nails, brass nails, all these different lengths and nails. Some stuff are barn. I like to get the big, 6-inch barn stud nails, because if you're going to want to put something up in a community fashion, like a barn building party, A, you're going to need tools, but B, you're going to need way bigger nails than you could possibly imagine. Like nobody ever gets those kind of nails, and big lug nut bolts too, so you can drill through. Get a big old washer, and who has like 10-inch bolts? These kind of things to put 2, 4. We'd actually probably need a 10-inch bolt for 2 4x4s to put them together and ratchet them down. I mean, it ratchets too. I mean, and then the star screws. I'm finding we just went by neighbor's house to help her. She's almost 80, and we were building a gate for her, and somebody else came by and put star screws in as the cross brace on the door while we were getting back to put the corner braces on. But we didn't have the star screw attachment to undo what somebody else did. And I'm like, oh, so you got to think across a full toolkit of how something could be built, and then the integration of other people's materials, because it seems that the star screw thing is a brand new one over the last, say, 3 to 4 years that all construction has moved to. But a lot of people are running with a Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver. You're never getting a star head hex screw out of those boards if you don't have the right. So, for me, getting those little kind of toolkits for $5 or $10, that I know they're going to break. They're not the best quality, but some's better than none. And those hex screw heads are a must that is on hardly anybody's radar. So to be able to screw in or screw or unscrew something.
David, this
duct tape and hex screws.
Hold on a second.
Hammers.
This just brings up a point. To have everything that you're describing, you'd almost have to own a Walmart, which means community is so important. You don't have to have all of these things. As long as you're with a like-minded group of people in a community, or you hook up with a like-minded group of people, they will have some of these things that you don't have. Make sure that you have what you have, and make sure it's in good working order and it's ready to be, shared with the collective, I guess, in a sense. And when I say collective, I don't certainly mean that in the communist sense. I mean that in the, we all need to survive because they're being run by tyrants sense. But, for the community, I think that's going to be important, because you can't have all of this. Impossible. You literally have to have a warehouse the size of a Walmart to put all the tools you needed, everything, generators, storable food. I mean, it's almost, I say impossible, but unless you just have a tremendous amount of means, you're not going to be able to pull all this off, David. Community is the key, is it not?
It is, and practicing. Like the only reason I was able to tell you about that is because we already worked on it and did it. Like if I didn't ever do that, I never would have known what I just told you. So even, look at the general populace. How many of them have really built something from wood, from taking a 12-foot 2x4 and measuring it out and cutting it and finding other, side cuts that might fit depending on what kind of shelving you're using or whatever. I mean, unless you're really living it and working it, like we're putting up a fence, a 4x4 wire wrapped fence around 1,500 feet of our front 2.5 acres to keep the dogs, the chickens, the guinea fowl in and protect our orchard. But originally we started with welded wire fence, which was really difficult to bend. And like putting all these 4x4 posts in, concrete in them, putting the T-posts in. I mean, it was a learning curve for me. But now that I've done it once, I could come over to your house and help you. So it's all about these acquired skills that we've had over our lifetimes. Because James, I'm sure there's 1,000 things you did that I don't know how to do. But if I was starting it, you could say, man, I already did that one time. It was a pain in the ass,
That's
but
right. That's right.
I could still help you do it, So it's all, I think also in addition to the materials, to get a full list of everybody's skills, or at least something they've done once in their life then if you decide to have a project, there's already sort of a database where you can put out if there's 100 people in your community, like, all right, who's already worked on this at least once that can come and help? These things, you're going to need it. You're never going to do it one person. So anybody that can help would make things much faster also, and a better quality product at the end.
And I want to give a message to the young adults out there. Being the number one player on Call of Duty is not going to be a useful skill in the new world that we're entering into. Whether you like it or not, there is a great reset coming. Is it going to be a great reset that's going to benefit them or essentially benefit us? I guess the jury's still out on that. We'll see how that plays out. But regardless, you're going to have some skills besides, a controller on a video game. That's not going to get you very far. I guess unless you work for the Department of Defense and you're controlling drones, David. But that's a whole nother. That's a whole nother episode. We're coming here towards the end. We only got about 2.5 minutes left before the end of the show. Let's leave some people with something positive and something they can, an action item that they can leave the broadcast with. What's the first thing you would do if you were listening to this broadcast, David, after the show's over and the music starts playing? What would you do first thing today to help get yourself prepared for what's coming?
Buy seeds while they're available, because as you mentioned, if 40 people want to go buy garden tools and those same 40 people want to go to Johnny's Seeds or True Leaf Market or whatnot, the seeds are going to run out almost instantly. So to be able to get something, it's great to have the storable foods, but that's going to run out. So you're going to have to think about in the future refilling that with something that you're growing. So getting the seeds so you'll be able to grow the food. And I know we can't grow, you could grow wheat, barley, buckwheat, these kind of things, but it's going to take a communal effort. But you can still get at the farm co-ops 50-pound bags of that. So you can do an enormous amount of field space with 50-pound bag of like buckwheat. You can do a couple acres. I would definitely be looking towards the seeds right now. Planting season's over, so that full rush of everybody running to get everything in the beginning of the planting season, it's kind of the breathing room right now. We're coming into like the second season crop of beans and whatnot, but go get the seeds right now, because that's going to be your last chance to get them before things really de-evolve over the next few months. And it will begin in September. And I'm not making like, oh, it's going to be, it's going to start happening in September. But I've been on that same timeline since like July or even June of last year, once I knew the fertilizer shortages were coming in and how that would knock on. And now we got the pesticide and herbicide shortages. So the yields out of the fields aren't going to be as high because the plants are going to be competed with and the insects are going to eat them. So yields are going to come down even further than there were with just fertilizer shortages. So yields are going to be real dismal at the end of the year, and food prices are going to spike. Markets are going to get affected. CME won't be able to deliver grains